the end. And if you have any questions, I would love to hear them. They can be questions about the talk. They can be questions about the things that you're seeing in the media. Don't feel shy at all. Definitely make a note, jot down your questions or put them in the chat, and then we'll get to them at the end of the talk tonight. All right, so let us dive in and talk a bit about what is AI. So this is one of those topics, one of those questions that seems like it should be very obvious. What is AI? But I have to share, it's kind of complicated. It's sometimes a very difficult question to answer very easily. And part of the reason for that is that experts don't always agree on exactly what is AI. They don't always agree on the exact definition. But I felt it was important to at least give you some definition. And so I'm pulling one here from the OECD to share a little bit about what AI is. Now, I've summarized that definition a little bit myself. So when I think of AI, I think about machines that have some level of decision-making autonomy. That's kind of my simplified version. But the other thing I wanted to do with this slide, and there's a lot of different terms here, is I just wanted to situate this whole conversation for you in terms of all of these confusing things that you may have been hearing about: machine learning, deep learning, neural nets. How does this all relate to each other? And so my main point of this slide is to show you that AI is a very big field. And then within that, we have this technique called machine learning, which is how we tend to build a lot of modern day AI. And then within that, we have more specific techniques, things like deep learning and neural nets. And that's this idea of modeling AI kind of like a brain, making AI kind of like a brain. And then within that, and this is where everybody's been talking about for the last year or so, we have generative AI. And so generative AI is really all about generating new content, whether that's images or text. And then if I was going to put ChatGPT on the slide, it'd be a little tiny dot in the very small bottom of the slide, in the little black box. And the reason I wanted to show you this is tonight, what I'm going to focus on is this big expansive field of AI. We are going to get to talk a little bit about ChatGPT, but part of what I wanted to do is show you that AI is a lot bigger than just ChatGPT, and it's a lot bigger than just generative AI. So that's my main point in showing you this particular slide. All right, so that's one way of thinking about AI. I want to show you a video now. This is a different way of thinking about what exactly is AI. And this is from some work that I've done with the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. It's from a video series called AI Plus You, which I created with them to help educate youth in grades 10 to 12 to help them understand what is AI, what is machine learning, what are all these terms, and what do they mean for youth. And so some of the examples in here are a tiny bit playful, but I do play this video for adult audiences all the time, and they always get a lot out of it. So we're going to take a look at this video called Terminating AI Myths. And I think it's going to give you a bigger picture on what is this whole field, what is this thing that we call AI. So we'll take a look, and then I'll unpack this with you. Here we go.
Artificial intelligence.
Oh, we cannot hear very clearly the video voice.
Kinds of technology you've seen on TV or in
Hollywood
films. Maybe it's a killer robot who's come to terminate you and your family. Or perhaps it's like the operating system in the movie Her, a system that knows you so well that you can't help but fall in love with it. While those sci-fi scenarios are just that, science fiction, there is a lot of AI technology that powers our everyday world, from the spam filters in your email, to the fraud detection algorithms used by credit card companies, to the recommendation systems that suggest that next movie you might enjoy. But these boring, everyday technologies, are they really AI? What exactly is AI? The term artificial intelligence was coined by John McCarthy in 1956. McCarthy was part of a group of researchers focused on making intelligent machines that could achieve goals. Intelligence in machines has always been defined in relation to human intelligence. An early focus for AI was to build machines that could do better than humans at certain tasks, such as playing a game of chess. This better than humans concept formed the foundation for the Turing test, named after the British mathematician Alan Turing. This test was designed to see if a machine could convince an average person that it was human through answering a series of questions. The Turing test became known as the imitation game, and it has since been called too easy now that it's been accomplished. Part of the problem in defining artificial intelligence is that the goalposts keep shifting. Once AI had beat the world's best chess player in 1997, the technology that allowed it to do that, really sophisticated search capabilities powered by a lot of computer processing power, became commonplace. It's now behind-the-scenes infrastructure, used in applications like filtering your email for spam. These powerful technologies are often called artificial narrow intelligence because they tend to do just one thing very well. When a technology becomes so commonplace that we don't even think about it anymore, it becomes like wallpaper. It's there, but you don't really notice it. Technologies like the printing press, a revolutionary invention in its day, or the telephone or radio or television, they just become part of everyday life. This process is known as the domestication of technology. Some of AI, the boring stuff we've mentioned, has already been domesticated. So now when we think about AI, we tend to first think about the technology that is not here yet, what might be considered artificial general intelligence. This type of AI can do many different things at a human level or even beyond. It's a superintelligence that is a staple in science fiction. And this is what many people think about when they envision AI. However, artificial intelligence, as McCarthy originally defined it, the use of smart machines to achieve goals, that is a technology that already lives among us and powers our everyday world.
All right, before we move on, I'm just going to make a couple of points about that video. So one of the things that we see in this video is this idea that AI is just always out of reach. It's always this next thing. And that's one of the reasons it's so hard to define. So people have a vision of what is AI, and then we accomplish that, and that technology becomes really normalized. And then we think, well, that's not really AI. AI is this next thing. And so that's going to come up in the talk tonight. I'm going to be talking about some things where AI is part of this infrastructural layer of these technologies that you're seeing in your life every day. But you might go, is that really AI? And this is why. So I wanted to call that out. All right, so that's a little bit about AI and the history of AI. Let's talk a little bit about some of these ethical challenges. So what tends to happen when we invent a technology, whether it's a ship or a plane or electricity or artificial intelligence, is we get really focused on all the progress and the things the technology can do and all the innovation. And sometimes we forget that in inventing a technology, we also bring forth all of these other things, all of these other possibilities. And this is the space that I tend to focus on. This is the world of AI ethics. We can ask ourselves, what are the impacts that AI systems are having? And these are some of the impacts. So we're using AI in so many different spheres. We're using it to decide who should get medical care, who should get a job, who should get a loan, how we're going to educate people. And so we see these headlines come up quite a bit in the world of AI and AI ethics, talking about the ways in which AI is impacting people. And in a lot of cases, it's impacting people in ways that challenge some of our ethical notions, things like fairness, for example. We've seen that with racially biased algorithms or gender biased algorithms that are deciding things. Or we can ask ourselves about the impact of a technology like ChatGPT on something like education. So teachers were really divided on whether this was a good thing or whether this was going to really challenge education in ways that weren't very helpful. So these are all questions that fall into this realm of ethics. And these are some of the topics that come up in this world of AI ethics. We talk about things like privacy. So we have a lot of data, and we're going to talk more about data in just a bit, but we have a lot of data that goes into building these AI systems. And we can ask ourselves, where did we get all of that data? do we have the right to use that data? Is there consent to use that data? Is there perhaps over surveillance going on in collecting all of that data? So lots of challenges around this idea of privacy. And then we have questions about fairness. How do we know that these algorithms are being fair, that they're not discriminating against people, that they're not making unjust decisions? And sometimes we don't always know what's going on. Companies aren't always incredibly transparent with us. And when there's a lack of transparency, it's really hard to make decisions because you're not really sure what exactly is happening. Is AI being used here or not? We don't often know. And similarly with this idea of explainability, sometimes these algorithms are just a black box. We don't really know how they're making decisions. It's all very hidden. And in a lot of cases, some of the experts aren't even really 100% sure on exactly what's going on in these algorithmic systems. And all of that also leads to this question of accountability. So when an AI system makes a decision about you that has impacts on your life, how do you contest that? How do you redress that? How do you challenge that? And ultimately, who is accountable or who is responsible? So these are all of the common questions that tend to come up in this world of AI ethics. All right, so now I want to talk about you. I want to talk about AI in your everyday life. I want to talk about the ways in which ethical challenges are coming up in how you are encountering AI in your everyday life. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to weave in some stories about AI, and then we're going to talk about some things that are technologies that I think you will all be really familiar with, and the ways in which those can raise some ethical issues. So the first story I want to tell you goes back to the 1950s. So you saw in that video back in 1956, that's when John McCarthy first coined that term of AI. And if we think about what was going on in the 1950s, and I'll tell you, I'm telling my history from a bit of a Western perspective. So I know that we have a global audience on this call, but I'm telling this history a bit from the Western perspective. So basically, we've come out of World War II and we're going into a Cold War. And as we go into this Cold War period in the 1950s, all of these military agencies are really interested in these computing technologies because they're really interested in this idea of surveillance. And so they start funding a lot of these computer science programs, and they start funding a lot of the AI programs. And this idea of surveillance and AI, it has a really long history that dates back to the earliest days of AI. But I also think that it's also informed the kinds of technologies that we have today. And this idea of surveillance is still very much a concern, I would say, from an ethics standpoint when it comes to these technologies. So let me show you how this works in your own world. Literally in your home, some of you might have a digital assistant. It might be Alexa, it might be Siri, it might be Google. And so there's been a lot of articles about, are these assistants always listening to us? Are they always collecting information? And this is, again, speaking to this idea of surveillance. Now, the intention here is that these systems are supposed to help us to do things, make life more convenient. But I think we've all had that experience where we've been talking with a friend or somebody in private, we think it's in private, and then all of a sudden we see the ad for that car that we were talking about online. I think we've all had that kind of experience. And so it just speaks to this idea again of, are we always being surveilled? It also extends to how we are thinking about using these technologies ourselves. And video doorbells are part of that story. Some of you might have video doorbells. It's a technology that's pretty normalized. Many people have them. The Ring doorbell is one example. And in a lot of cases, the actual police have contacted people who are surveilling their neighborhoods with these video doorbells, keeping track of their own private property, and said, if you send in video footage, that might be helpful for us as the police as well. And so there's this interesting interplay again, where citizens have been kind of encouraged to be part of this surveillance mechanism. And again, this has become quite normalized to the point where many people are participating in this. But these kinds of technologies actually can have adverse impacts for certain groups of people. There's certain groups of people that are over-surveilled or that are deemed to look more suspicious more often. And that can lead to certain things like biases and profiling and so forth. And then there's this idea that I would say has really happened quite a lot more in the last couple of years since COVID. And it's this idea that maybe we're being surveilled at work as well. And especially as we're working from home more, we're in these hybrid work situations, there's a sense that technology can be used to surveil us as workers. So all of these surveillance mechanisms are woven into our world, our homes, our lives, our workplaces, and I would say increasingly normalized. And underpinning all of that is an AI infrastructure. The other story I want to tell you relates to this idea of deception. And this, again, goes back to the earliest days of AI. In the 1950s, there was a famous paper written by Alan Turing, who's a British mathematician. He wrote a paper about this thing called the Turing test. And what the Turing test was, is this test that you would basically be able to prove that your AI had a level of intelligence if you could convince a human that your AI, your machine, was also a human. So what do we call it when somebody tries to deceive us? It's deception. And that's really what the Turing test is somewhat about. It's about fooling a human into thinking a machine is also human. And this ethical issue of deception is, again, threaded through some of the modern AI that we see today. So we can think about this issue of deep fakes. We've all probably seen the Pope in the puffy jacket picture, and we know it's a deep fake because the Pope doesn't usually dress like this. But if people wanted to use these technologies to really fool us, they now have a set of tools that is pretty good at creating fake audio, fake video, and fake images to the point where it's going to be very difficult to tell what is real and what is actually fake. So deep fakes connect to this issue of deception, and I think are a modern or current example of it. There's also this idea of fake friends. So this is a company that markets a virtual AI girlfriend. And there are other companies that are marketing AI friends and relationships and bots to help you with like mental health, for example. And these kinds of fake friendships, again, are another form of deception. Maybe we're kind of even deceiving ourselves into thinking we're having a relationship with technology. And I think it's so early days that we don't know what the actual impacts are going to be from this, but I put it under this category of deception. And I would say that ChatGPT is somewhat in this category as well. So it can mimic human behavior. What we tend to do is anthropomorphize the technology, which means we basically ascribe human-like behavior to the technology. We think ChatGPT is listening to us. We think it maybe is saying things to us that are in dialogue with us, when really it's just a large language model that's statistically spitting out the next word, and it doesn't really understand anything that it says. I have a video later on that goes more into ChatGPT, but this idea of deception is what I wanted to highlight in this set of examples. And then the next two slides are related to what are we trying to do with machine learning? So you remember machine learning is the big technique that we're using to build AI systems. And there's two things that are going on here. One is this idea of classification. So in order, we have this data and we kind of know things, let's say, about objects or about people. And what's sort of instrumental to that is this idea that we're classifying things. And when we start to classify people, we get into some really ethically fraught areas. So imagine how might we classify people? Well, we might pick things like hair color. We might pick things like eye color. We might pick gender. We might pick height. But then we get into wanting to know other things like what is intelligence? How would we classify someone as more intelligent or less intelligent? And now, again, we're making judgments about people. And so this really gets into the politics of and sort of category of ethical decision making. So once we classify something, the next thing we want to do is we want to make some predictions about that person. We want to know who should get the loan, who should get the job, who should be given the opportunity. And so this combination of classifying and predicting as it relates to people has all kinds of ethical considerations. I'm going to show you how this relates, again, to things that are very common and everyday in your life. So we're using these tools in a wide range of domains. And one way we're using them is to decide who should get into a school. We're using them to decide how to mark or grade things. There's a whole range of technologies that are being used in education that are predictive. And again, how do we know that these are fair? How do we know that everything is equitable and just, and that the systems aren't making decisions in ways that are discriminatory? This is a really big question. And it's a question that also plays out in the world of hiring, because we're also using these algorithms and AI systems there. So this one company, HireVue, they would do video interviews where they would film you, and then they would actually analyze your facial features and maybe even what was in the background behind you. And all of that would add up to whether you move forward in a job process, a hiring process or not. And there was a lot of discussion as to whether that was fair, whether that was discriminatory, so much so that HireVue actually discontinued that practice in 2021. So these are very controversial things. These algorithmic systems are also making decisions about who should get access to resources. And banks know that they need to make sure that they do this well, because if they don't, they can lose customer trust. So there's a lot of discussion from companies about how to be more responsible, how to be equitable, how to be fair, and how not to have discriminatory decisions being made. And then there's insurance. So think about why we get insurance. We want to make sure that we're covered for things. But imagine if an insurance company knew something about you. Let's say that they knew that you had an underlying health condition, and then they decided, I wonder if I should give you that insurance because you have that health condition. I don't know if I want to insure you. So again, we see a situation where, because there's so much data in the world and it's being used in different contexts, we might have an unfair decision made to not give you insurance. And then the other thing we want to make sure when we get insurance is that we're going to actually be able to make a claim if we need to make a claim per the terms of the insurance. So this company, Lemonade, is the first end-to-end AI insurance company, and it claims to be able to process an insurance claim in 2 seconds. So it's incredibly efficient, which is great. But it does lead to these questions about, is it actually being fair? Or is it maybe just denying a whole bunch of things that it should actually process? We don't really know. We're not really 100% sure. So this world of insurance is incredibly important because we all need, health insurance, or we all need to insure the contents of our home. So if we're being denied things for discriminatory reasons, it's going to be a real problem for us. So those are some basic everyday ways that you're encountering these technologies in some in spheres that I think are just part of everyday life. And then we can think about things like government services as well. So social services is another area that's using some of these technologies. And not all of us are encountering this directly, but indirectly, we are in a society that is using these algorithms to decide who should get benefits. In this case, who should have their children taken away from them in the child welfare system. These are pretty high stakes situations. And we're relying on algorithms to do this work. And in some cases, it has been shown that they are discriminatory and they're not necessarily making decisions in the best interests of those who are there, who they are there to serve. So there's problems with these systems in some cases. So that's a little bit about how you're probably encountering AI in some really everyday ways. I want to also talk a little bit about data, because data plays a really important role in all of this. And we're all contributing in some way our data to this whole AI project. So I want to talk about the role of data in our society and in AI, and how it might be leading to some of these biases and issues that we're seeing in AI. So the first thing to know about data is we have a particular vision of what data can do in our society. So we tend to think of data as the truth. We think it's really objective. We think we're going to be data-driven. And it is this sort of scientific, objective sort of view that data brings to something. When in fact, data is always a representation. And many times it's a very imperfect representation. So you may have heard the saying, the map is not the territory. Data is not the actual thing, it's a representation of something. And again, like a map, it only can represent something to a certain degree. And if you work with data, you probably know this. You probably know some of the ways in which data can be imperfect, some of the quality issues and challenges that we have with data. So if we take these two things, data is truth, data is objective, but data is a representation and imperfect, we have a bit of a tension between what we believe data can do. And that's part of where we see some of these issues in AI systems. So data can also contain bias. And some of the ways that data can contain bias is because our world is biased, and data tends to be a reflection of what's going on in our world. So just to give you an example that relates back to that hiring system from Amazon that I showed you a few slides ago, they built a system that would systematically discriminate against women. So a woman would apply for the job and it would screen her resume out and only move forward the male applicants. And the reason it did that is because it was looking for a technical role, computer science role, and historically speaking, based on the data, men were more likely to be successful at that role. Now, that doesn't mean that women would not be successful at that role. That's not what it means at all, but it means that there is a lot of societal biases that led to the result that was in that database where it was mostly men. And that's what we mean by biases in this historical data. And then we use that data and then we reinforce the bias once again. So this is a big problem with some of these systems. We can also think about data that we don't have. And this might seem a bit paradoxical because I'm talking about the fact that we have lots of data in the world, big data, masses of data. So why wouldn't we have data for certain things? And the reason is that in many cases, we have the data that we have because somebody decided it was important. And in some cases, we've decided that certain groups of people maybe aren't as important. So one of the areas that we're missing data is for women in healthcare. And that's why I have this image up here. And there's a great book written about this called Invisible Women. It's about the lack of data for women in all of these important domains. And so we need to get that data. And if we don't have that data, we can't actually put it into the analysis, into the AI system. And then that group of people gets underserved because they're not represented in the system. They're not in the data. So it's paradoxical, but sometimes we have too little data for certain groups of people. And then there's the ways in which we think about data. So we kind of treat data as an extractable resource. And you might have heard the saying, data is the new oil. And I think that sums it up. It's sort of like data is this resource that we get to extract. And the problem with thinking about data this way is it decouples the data from people. And when we forget that the data is coming from people, it's easier then to forget all of these ethical issues that I've been talking about because we kind of take the data and the people and we separate them in ways that makes it easier to do things that are perhaps not quite as ethical as we want them to be. So part of what I try and do is reconnect that relationship and say that people are behind the data. And because of that, we need to respect the people and the data itself. And then there are environmental impacts from data. And we don't tend to think about this because we talk about data in very ephemeral terms. So data is in the cloud. It doesn't really seem to have a material impact. And yet, what is the cloud? Well, it's a whole bunch of data centers around the world. Some of them are very big, the size of 4 football fields. And they have a lot of needs. They need to be cooled and kept at a temperature-controlled rate. There's computational needs for all of these large language models that we're building, all of these massive AI systems like ChatGPT. All of that has a carbon footprint. And as we're moving forward with more and more of these kinds of AI systems, we're making that carbon footprint bigger. And we've seen the impacts from climate change. We've just come through one of the worst wildfire seasons ever here in Canada. So I think we need to be thinking about the ethical implications of all of this as we consider the use of data. And then there's this idea of aggregating data and reusing it. And that really challenges privacy. There's been a lot of work done on this. One of the people in this area is Dr. LaTanya Sweeney. And she was able to identify a VIP's healthcare record through very little data. She had like 3 points of data that she was able to use. And the reason this is possible is because even if we make anonymous data set A, B, and C, they're all anonymous. Once we mash them all together, we can then re-identify individuals. So that's one of the issues. The other thing is we take away context. So data that never used to go together, like your heart rate data, your social media data, and your financial data. Those things never used to go together, but now they can. They can be all put together for one for analysis by a machine learning system. So this is part of the challenge that we have in terms of maintaining privacy with data when we put it into these big data sets. So that is a lot of challenges that we have when it comes to these systems. I want to turn now and I want to talk a little bit about what can we do about this? And specifically, what can you do about any of this? And I think sometimes it's easy to think, well, I can't really do anything. I mean, I'm not, you might be thinking, I'm not working in this field. What am I going to do about all of this? So I think I'm going to give you 3 specific things that you can do. But before we get to that, I hope that you can see that we actually do need to do some things differently, that we need to change. I hope that is apparent from some of the examples that I've given you. The other thing I want you to know is change is possible. Change is absolutely possible. We can do things differently. We don't have to do things the way that we've been doing them. And then the last piece is, I think that change involves you. So I think you can be part of this change. I'm going to give you 3 specific ways that you can be part of this change. So the first thing that you can do is you can challenge the storyline, the narrative. So there's this story that says, hey, AI is inevitable, and this is the way it's built, and we just have to accept it, and that's that. And I will say there are very powerful forces at play, and there are powerful actors and powerful companies that have a lot of money that want us to believe that. But I believe that it doesn't have to be that way. And I'm going to give you one example of how change has happened in this field. So a couple of years ago, there was a lot of concerns about facial recognition technologies. You've probably seen many of those stories. And there was research done by some great researchers like Dr. Joy Buolamwini, who said she did this research study called Gender Shades, and it showed that these technologies didn't work as well for women with darker skin in particular, and people with darker skin in general. And through her work and through her advocacy, she actually got a group of companies to A, change how they built facial recognition technology to make it better, and B, get facial recognition technology taken off the table in some of these higher stakes applications like law enforcement. So I think there are ways to make a difference, to have impacts, to make a win. And I think part of it just is being skeptical of this whole narrative that all of this is inevitable. So that's number 1. The second thing that I think you can do is you can demand better product choices and regulation. So as a consumer, you have a lot of power. And I like to think about this as when we go to the grocery store, imagine if we had to go through every product on the shelf and go, is this product safe? Let me read up everything about this product and let me determine if it's safe to purchase. And that would take us forever. We'd never get out of the grocery store. But that's what we're doing with digital technologies. It's up to every one of us to inspect these things and to know something about them. And this is where regulation can come in, because with food regulation, we can go to Safeway and we can know that we can buy anything off the shelf and it meets a minimum safety requirement that it's okay to consume. And that's what we need to get to with AI products as well, is we need to know as consumers that these products are safe. And so in order to get there, so we don't have to do this one by one all by ourselves, we need some regulators to come in and do that work. So we can demand from our politicians and from our vendors that they have safe products. And then the last thing we can do is we can insist on upholding human rights. So we can say that we believe that these AI systems should make sure that they are built in such ways that they're not creating a lot of harms for people. And one example that's playing out right now is around generative AI. It's causing a lot of problems for artists. So the people in our community who are illustrators or who draw or who have written books, their work has been taken by these systems and is used for training data, and they haven't been compensated. And you saw this playing out recently with the big strike that happened in the US and the Writers Guild and SAG-AFTRA, but it's also hurting other groups who don't have big unions, people like illustrators. So is it worth it so that we can have a product that was designed this way? I don't think it is. And this is the kind of thing we can demand, again, that companies do things differently and better, so we're not hurting groups of people like this. So that's what I mean by upholding human rights. So you as individuals have a lot of power to talk to politicians, to talk to vendors, to kind of make your opinion known, because it matters what you think about all of this. This is the way that we're going to move forward. All right. So as I finish the talk, I want to show you one more video. This is from my series, AI plus You again. This is the newest video in the series. It's all about ChatGPT and generative AI. So we'll take a look at that. And then after that's done, I'm happy to take some questions. So we'll have a look at it right now.
In late 2022, a new AI system arrived on the scene, ChatGPT. Created by OpenAI, ChatGPT allows you to type in some instructions, and then the chatbot generates a bunch of content based on your prompt. For example, you might ask ChatGPT to write a Shakespearean sonnet about pizza, and the bot would churn out prose using Shakespearean language, perhaps comparing pizza to a summer's day. Thy golden crust, thy gooey cheese. You get the picture. Since the technology was easy to use and free, it sparked huge demand, with 100 million users signing up in just a few months. But what was so special about ChatGPT? While chatbots are not a new technology, ChatGPT put a new twist on chatting with a bot through a new type of AI architecture, a generative pre-trained transformer, or GPT for short. This type of AI can generate a lot of novel and very plausible sounding content. It does this by making some statistical best guesses based on the probability about the next word in a sentence. For example, let's say we have this sentence: the cat sat on the what? If you type that into Google search, you'll see that Matt automatically appears. Probabilistically, based on internet data, Matt is the most likely choice. It's more likely than, say, rock. But cats can sit on rocks. That is certainly possible. It's just not the choice that is likely to occur according to internet data. ChatGPT is also stochastic, a fancy word for random. So while it is probabilistically more likely that the cat sat on the mat, if you prompt it enough times, eventually you can get something other than that due to the randomness factor. However, it's not all cats and mats. ChatGPT can also generate harmful content too. Even when the data isn't reliable, ChatGPT will still generate something, and it will do it in ways that seem plausible and authoritative. And it doesn't end with just text. This generative AI technology is being used to generate artwork and code, audio, and even video. Like other machine learning systems, ChatGPT has been trained on a whole lot of data, basically a snapshot of the internet. This is data that has been posted by people to social media, websites, or collectively created digital sites, such as Wikipedia or Reddit. The practice of automatically gathering data from the internet is known as web scraping, and it is controversial. When people post information on the internet, they do it to share information with other humans. They are not thinking that a third party is going to come along and take their data to use it for other purposes, such as training an AI system. Some of this content is copyrighted, which means it's someone's legal intellectual property. OpenAI and organizations who have developed similar technologies are facing a number of lawsuits related to the use of this web-scraped data. When you prompt a chatbot, you are sharing data too, and it's not always clear where that data winds up and how many organizations could have access to it. Remember, what is typed into a chatbot doesn't stay with the chatbot. Beyond the data, there are many questions about this new technology and how it might be used. Bad actors can use it to spread mis- or disinformation, or to create deep fakes, causing all kinds of harm. Students can use it to write their assignments,
What does this mean for the future of education? Bigger picture, there's concern about the future of jobs. For anyone who earns their living writing text or code or creating visual or audiovisual content, that is a whole lot of people who might be impacted. It's still very early days for generative AI, but one thing is clear. We all need to learn about how these technologies work so that we can make informed choices about how or even if we wish to use them. All right, so I'm going to end it there. If you want to stay in touch with me, I'd love to connect with you. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can also learn more about the work that I'm doing at my website, ethicallyalignedai.com. I also put together a micro-credential. If you're interested in wanting to do a deep dive and get some training in AI ethics, you can look for more details either on my website or at the PowerEd by Athabasca University website. So that is the talk tonight. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing. I see there are some things in chat, and I'm also happy just to take questions. As I said earlier, I love questions. So stop sharing so I can see everyone better.
Katrina, you're so convincing and informative. No questions.
Oh, there must be questions. I know there are. Oh, here we go.
Okay.
As an AI ethicist, what is your biggest concern as it relates to the future uses of AI and the future of humanity? Yeah, I think that's a fantastic question. And there's like so many different ways you can take that question and so many different things to be concerned about. But I'm going to say that my biggest concern relates to this idea of the story, the narrative of what we believe is possible. And so this idea that it's all inevitable and that we have no choice, we can't do anything differently, we're just going to have to accept the way things are done. Because if we don't believe different things are possible, then that really shuts down the possibility of doing anything differently. And that's what I really think we need to do. I think we need to, it's not about not having AI or not having these technologies. For me, it's about making different choices to do these things in better ways. And I really believe we can do that, but we need to believe we can do that. And so that to me is where it starts, is with that idea of the story. Is there any regulation on AI yet? So there's different groups that are trying to figure this out, and probably the one that is furthest ahead, I think, is the European, the EU AI Act. So they seem to be furthest along on a number of different fronts. Europe was also the first with improved data privacy protections with the GDPR, which came into effect in 2018. So they've been leading the pack for a while. Here in Canada, we have Bill C-27, which is a combination data privacy protections that are being enhanced, plus the AIDA, so that's our version of the EU AI Act. But there's a lot of questions about it. One of the big questions is, will it make it through before we get to an election? That's one of the big questions, because once an election gets called, things kind of tend to go off the table. But I would say that sort of Europe is one to watch. And then in terms of more specific regulation, the other one that comes to mind is the New York bias audits that came into play. And this is very specific. So it's specific to New York for one thing, and it's specific to the context of hiring. So AI as it relates to hiring and jobs. And they felt that that was risky enough that they were going to push through some local regulations just to address that and just to have audits for that. So that's another one that comes to mind. Is there any hope for creating a backwards sort of ChatGPT to identify when someone used ChatGPT to create something? Right, yeah. Yes, there is, but I'll tell you there's some limitations to it. So when ChatGPT came out and everybody was concerned right away with this use case of potential cheating and writing essays and that sort of thing, there were some people that came out with some ChatGPT text detecting software, basically. But I'll share with you, I tried it. I tried one of them that was on the market and it didn't work for me. there was content that I 100% had created using the chatbot, and there was content that I know I had written, and it did not do well on knowing which content was which. And I've seen a lot of articles saying that these technologies are a bit hit and miss, and you would never want to accuse someone of cheating unless you were 100% sure. That could be very bad for that student and their academic future. And so as someone who teaches in the university, I personally wouldn't be relying on that to catch people. Instead, what I try and do is educate people to help encourage them to want to do more of their own work. And also, if you're going to be using a chatbot to write things, I think that issue of transparency comes up, and you should say, I've used the chatbot in these ways, and kind of give that citation and be transparent about it. So that's how I try and deal with it, rather than some of these softwares that don't work out that well, in my opinion. What are the important what are the important knowledge to teach young children who are learning digital tech and digital literacies about AI and AI ethics? Yeah, that's a great question. That's why I created the series, actually. And this isn't super young children. Obviously, the series requires someone to be maybe junior high level so they can grasp some of these concepts a bit more. But my whole reason behind that series is that as people are learning how to code or how to build AI, I think they also need to really learn about how to make good choices about how to construct AI and what some of the impacts might be from these technologies. So that, I hope, is addressing that level. In terms of younger audiences, I think there's opportunities to take similar ideas, but then make them age appropriate for a younger audience, like maybe for that K to I don't know, grade maybe 6, or that younger level, grade 8 level. And there are teachers that I work with who are trying to do some of that, like try and foster some of those conversations and make sure that we can start to do this earlier, because I think we just haven't yet, but we need to. Are you really positive that AI ethics can catch up with quick AI technology growth? Yes, I am. I am positive. Why am I positive is probably your follow-up question. What makes me positive about it? I think that, the thing about ethics, that we've been debating our ethical values and where we're going as a society for a long time, and ethics does tend to evolve as well. And technology raises new questions. So what ethics is really good at, better than regulation, is these should questions. Should we do this? Should we do that? That's where ethics is really, really handy. And having ethical theories and knowing how to deliberate ethically, that can serve you really well. And actually think of ethics as a leading indicator for future law. So I actually am spending a lot of time right now with lawyers, helping them think through some of these challenges that will eventually, I think, get into regulations and policies. But I think ethics is useful for considering this should question. I'm curious what you think of the supposed resolution for the film writers' strike. From what I understand, part of the agreement is that AI cannot be considered content creators. How can a resolution like this be enforced effectively and fairly? It's a great question, very specific one. I'm not super familiar with the exact resolution of the strike, but from reading what you're saying here, like I do know that AI was one of the key issues in the strike. And there was a lot of concern, again, about not wanting it to take over jobs or to, in the case of actors, I had read that basically they would pay the actor one time, and then the image, they could use that forever in perpetuity and do new things with it. There was actually a really interesting Black Mirror episode that sort of spoke to that, was starring Selma Hayek. It was talking about the ways in which an image can be taken from someone and then used to do all kinds of like really awful things. It sort of reminded me of the concerns that these actors had in real life. Black Mirror always seems to be ahead of the curve. How can a resolution like this be enforced effectively and fairly? And I'm not sure exactly what the resolution is. If you want to turn, I don't know if you're able to turn your audio on, if you want to elaborate on that a bit more, but I guess to me, it would be like honoring the terms perhaps of whatever was agreed to in terms of enforcing it.
I think, sorry, I don't have a camera to turn on, but because I mean, if somebody say someone gets help from AI to write a script or something like that, that's obviously different than having AI write your entire script, or different than writing the entire script yourself as a writer. So I mean, part of what I'm curious about is where there's obviously a lot of gray area, and then I'm wondering, like, where would you draw the line, or where would an enforcing body draw the line where, okay, like this company that made this, or this person that made this script, crossed the line where they let this AI write too much versus they just let it kind of co-pilot them through the writing. I think it's like a big gray area though.
Yeah, it's totally a gray area. I guess the thing that I think a lot about is power dynamics and who's being compensated fairly, which I think was at the crux of a lot of these conversations between the union and the studios. And so if it's all about, well, the studios are going to get to do whatever they want, and they're going to be, and the studio execs are going to get paid, and other people are not going to be paid, and they're going to be out of work, huge power imbalance. Versus if I'm a writer and I'm using some of these technologies in ways that are assistive, and I'm also going to be compensated fairly for all of that, and I'm going to see, I don't know, my residuals or royalties or whatever kind of payment system is going to happen, then I think for me, it's about ensuring the power dynamics of the outcomes are somewhat fair in a workplace scenario. As to the specific terms of, because I think about this too, like, okay, if I use Grammarly, is that like, we got to be transparent about Grammarly? That seems a little bit much. But if you're generating half of your article through AI or your paper, your essay, then I think, yeah, you should probably say something about that. So I think right now we're kind of navigating what exactly that means. I don't know there's any super hard and fast rules just yet, but I think that's one of the things we're going to have to work out for sure. How can a company that takes AI ethics as its mission make a profit? Does the inherent nature of making a profit compromise its neutrality? I don't think it has to. And this is another one of those kind of, if you want to take it in super far in one direction and say that, well, anything that we do ethically is going to compromise our ability to maximize our profit margins, that's one position. But think about a company like Patagonia, for example. They've done pretty well. And I would say that they have a lot of ethical considerations that have gone into decision-making for that company. And in fact, it became part of their brand, because when you think of Patagonia, you think of an outerwear company that's doing good things and trying to, recycle and use sustainable practices and how they're doing things. And I actually think it can become part of your brand promise if you do it right. So I don't think it has to be set up as an adversarial thing. I think it can be an enabling factor. And I really believe that if consumers have better choices in some of these situations, that they will make them. And I don't necessarily even think the better choices have to cost more per se. I think that's, again, a bit of a false construct. So I think it's about getting to a place where we can actually put some better choices on the market, and then we'll see what happens. But right now, we don't necessarily have that yet, especially with some of this generative AI, partially because it's a bit new. But I think as we move forward, there is a possibility to do things differently. What are your opinions about the concern regarding AI will destroy humanity? Yan, you asked the easy questions. What are my opinions on this? I think that, there's a lot of hype out there, and a lot of, it's a weird scenario because we're kind of in awe of some of these technologies and we're afraid of them at the same time. And then you go and ask these people, well, if you're so afraid, why are you building these technologies in the first place? And they basically say that they have to because it's almost like a calling or a mission. So it's kind of this weird dynamic that we're in. I feel like we can make different choices in how we're building technologies. I don't know that we need to continue on the pathway of building, super intelligence. I think there are people that would definitely say different things about that. But if we say AI is a tool and we want to use it in ways that are responsible, we really need to question, I think, this idea of wanting to build the super intelligence in the first place. It feels like something is amiss there. And I don't know that it's even a rational argument. I think it almost has this like religious fervor to it. So personally right now, I don't think a large language model is going to destroy humanity in that way. I think it would probably destroy humanity through some of the ways that I've been talking about in the talk tonight, like misinformation or getting people angry at each other so that they do bad things to each other that then winds up destroying something. But I don't know that it's in a position to take over. That's sort of my take on it. Yeah, thank you so much. These are fantastic questions. I don't know if there's any other questions or not.
Again, maybe I should make an announcement before people start to leave.
Yeah, why not? Nihan, do you have anything? You are the host. Otherwise, yeah, Bob. Hello, Nihan.
Or maybe he has left already.
Yeah, maybe
Anyway,
Bob, you can
so
make.
anyway, yeah. So yeah, thank you, Katrina, for a very informative, insightful presentation. And it so happens that, ladies and gentlemen, that Katrina will be presenting at TEMA Edmonton's Fall Conference on November 2nd and 3rd at NATE. And she'll be joined by a group of elite speakers, including Dr. Rich Sutton of Google DeepMind and the father of reinforcement learning, to talk about AI intelligence and its guardrails. And as our conference is supported by AMI, or Alberta Machine Intelligence Institute, we're giving all AMI members and those on the mailing list 20% discount on the conference registrations. But because I'm a board member of AlbertaAI, I managed to convince the demo board to extend AMI's 20% discount to all Alberta AI members, including those on the mailing list. So the regular registration fee for the two-day conference is $400, and with the discount, you only pay $320. So your registration includes breakfast and lunch over the 2 days, and as well a networking and happy hour, complete with a complimentary drink ticket, and lots of yummy finger food will be included in your registration. Your registration pass is also transferable. So if you cannot attend a block of sessions or an entire day, you can lend your pass to a friend or coworker. And by the same token, if you can only attend day 1 of the conference and your friend can only attend day 2, then you only have to buy 1 pass. So Amy will be notifying their members about the conference and the discount in a short few days. So if you want to take advantage of this discount, I recommend that you register for this conference right away. The Demo Fall Conference has been running since 2015, and 90% of the delegates had given the conference a fully satisfied to very satisfied review year after year. So to register for the conference, just Google Demo Edmonton, and that is DAMA Edmonton, and you see the link to the conference link right on the landing page. And use this code to get the discount, the 20% discount. All capital AAMII20. And by the way, to support students in our community, the fee for them is only $50 a day. So if you need more information about the conference, you can contact me at bhiew, that is BHIEW, @telus.net. So if you have any questions about this conference, anybody?
Maybe you can write down, your address there. I mean, the email or something on the
Okay.
chat board there, and then they can contact you. The
Okay.
conference name and also the day and also the contact information.
Yeah. Okay.
In that way, people can remember. Otherwise, you say something that they may be
Yeah.
nothing. Yeah. Hi, Nihan, you are still there?
Yes, I'm still here. Yeah.
Yeah, please. You can maybe say something before we end the.
Yeah. Thank you everyone to attending the event, and thank you, Kulina, to prepare and make this very informative and important presentation and talk. So we will have a monthly event next month as well, and we will invite a well-known speaker to make the talk as well. So thank you everyone to attending the event today.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
everyone.
for making this happen. Your I think presentation is really impressive to me because you add a lot of new information. Yeah. It's fortunate to get you come here. Today we have from around over, I think, 30 people here. This is good to see. So many people, they come from China as well because we promoted this program to China.
That's so wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you for all your fantastic questions. I love the engagement. So great. It was a pleasure to present to this group. Thank you.
Maybe in the future we can talk more about that because the ethics is really related to, a lot of things, especially for the safety, right? Reliable, all this kind of thing, and our privacy, it's all related to our daily life. I really impressed with your presentation. Mark is from my organization. Do you have any question? It's my colleague, Mark. Yeah. Good. Okay. Thank you, everyone, and see you next time.
Yes. Yeah, see you next time, everyone.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone.
So keep in touch,
Bye-bye.
and we'll see. Maybe next opportunity, we'll see how can we do it together.
Sounds good. Okay, take care. Good night.